Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasami. So it's Saturday night here at the monastery, and we're winding our way to the end of this month and the final couple of weeks of our winter retreat. It's been a really special, good time, I think, for many to be able to just step back and spend more time with formal practice and a relaxed pace. The weather's certainly been incredibly cooperative with all the pleasant temperatures and sunshine, in spite of the fact that it's a major drought and working towards a dry, crispy summer. But it's been great for walking and sitting meditation in the forest. I would guess that probably not everybody is constantly dwelling in unrelenting bliss. It's not the nature of most retreats. We all have our ups and downs, periods of inspiration and periods of quiet desperation. And these are just the nature of the human condition, the human mind going through its various phases and cycles based on karma, biology, who knows, conditioning. As we grow up, all these things come together in the human experience. And sometimes it feels all very cramped and difficult and tight and unpleasant, and sometimes there is some relief from that, and sometimes quite wonderful and happy and contented, at ease. But the ones that grab our attention often are the cramped, negative or difficult moods and mind states that come on all of us, just because we're human beings living in an imperfect world. So a couple of nights ago, Luang Por talked about, among other things, the 5 hindrances, obstructions to our clarity of mind and well-being. And I thought maybe I'd just spend a little bit of time this evening talking about contemplation of the mind itself, cittanupassana. One of the Satipatthanna sections, the third section in Satipatthanna, contemplation of the mind itself, and the third tetrad in the Anapanasati Sutta. Our tradition, the forest tradition, Thai forest tradition, strongly emphasizes contemplation of the body, and we've spent a lot of time the past few months doing teachings around that, reflections around that, and encouraging that constant mindfulness, awareness, clear comprehension of this embodied state. And that's our ground. And it's a ground not only in and of itself, but also for a very good way to see and understand the mind itself, because the experiences of the mind are reflected very closely and strongly in the body. So this is our point of reference for reality. Reality check is by being firmly grounded in the body. We really know what's happening if we're clearly established right here and now. And to see the mind and to see all the various moods that pass through it is the contemplation of the mind. And Chitta, talked about it several times in the past few months, but just to re-emphasize our understanding of Chitta, not as the verbal thinking mind, which is what most of us relate to when we hear the word mind. We think about thinking and thoughts, concepts, conceptualization, abstraction, all of those activities. And all those thoughts and mind constructs, actually, that's not what we're referring to with Chitta, although they are experiences in Chitta. All those thoughts and thinking, that's would be referred to as a sankhara, a formation, a fabrication, a creation, manifestation, vaci sankhara, especially. But Chitta is more that quality of awareness, knowing. It's a process, not a thing, not an object. Not a construction so much. So that quality of that simple quality of just knowing, awareness, Chitta, that is often and usually, for most of us, obstructed, occupied with many adventitious things passing through it that really give it a certain mood or color. And the hindrances are described in the suttas in various ways with various similes, like the ones that Ungpa talked about a couple of nights ago very vividly. And the one that I am thinking of now and in relation to the Chitta itself are the similes with the comparison to vessels of water. So you have a vessel of water of some sort, a container of water that is representative of Chitta in its purity. It's clear, reflective nature when it's just water, plain water, nothing added in its own natural state, no disturbances. And there it is. It's a clear, still presence and reflective, so that what comes through it becomes the nature of that water. So and the hindrances are described in that way. The hindrance of sense desire colors the water of the mind with a dye, like red or yellow or blue. The dye is dropped in, the dye of sense desire, and that becomes the color of the mind. That becomes the mood of the mind. When the sense desire is not present, the water clears up, the dye dissipates, and the water is back to its clear, still, reflective state. Or the simile of ill will, the hindrance of ill will, aversion, anger, boiling the water. And you can just feel that in the mind when dosa arises, that it just starts to boil. Almost immediately something happens like that. And you can feel the heat rise, and the mind just kind of goes into a feverish state. And that becomes the nature of our experience, becomes the nature of our mind. And when that passes away, it settles back down again to its clear natural state. And with dullness and drowsiness, it's like pond scum. covering over a thick layer of the mind, and you just feel heavy, top heavy, and unable to see out of the cloud, very heavy cloud sitting on top of the mind. And with the hindrance of restlessness and agitation, it's like a wind disturbing the surface of that clear water. It becomes agitated in lots of waves and ripples, so that the clarity is gone until that mood passes away and the mind settles back down. And for the hindrance of restlessness, the hindrance of doubt, there's that sense of turbidity, of confusion, of thickness, in the dark, can't see anything. It's all just not clear until that clears away. So these images are very strong ways of showing how the moods that pass through the mind change the quality of that simple, clear, reflective knowing. So the contemplation of the mind, in the Satipatthanna anyway, the instructions are pretty straightforward, just talking about a number of qualities, just to note whether they're there or not, with a certain level of non-judgment. Not that we're not discerning of the ones that are skillful and the ones that are unskillful, but that at least in the initial stages of the investigation, just wanting to know what's there. If we move into too much problem solving or wanting to change things right at the beginning, then sometimes that kind of agitation will obstruct our clear seeing. We won't really allow there to be a recognition of exactly what's there. And so we start with that curiosity, that just wanting to know, because we want to know the truth. That's our goal here, is we really want to see truth. So we want to be open to what it is that's actually present in the heart and the mind, for better or for worse. So just merely knowing the presence of, at least in the Satipatthanna, it's the presence of raga, lust in a sense, sensual lust especially, or the absence of it. So the instructions are to know when the mind is, when there is lust in the mind, and when the mind is free from lust, pure and simple. The same with dosa, irritation, anger, and when it's free from that. And the same for moha, delusion, when the mind is just not seeing clearly, not seeing the way things are, and then when there is no delusion, knowing that. And then when the mind is contracted, maybe small and cramped and unpleasant and dull, or when it's distracted, when it's kind of all over the place, out there, agitated, unable to be still. So just knowing those in their presence or their absence, and how important it is to remind ourselves to know their absence too. Oftentimes it's the presence that gets all the press, gets our attention, and then we sometimes scarcely know when it's not there. So noticing the lack of those those obstructive states of mind too. And you have to make an effort to do that. You have to make a conscious effort to bring that to mind periodically, and to see the effect that knowing that has in the mind too. The other states that are talked about in that section of Satipatthanna are more positive states, but also knowing their presence, just merely knowing their presence or their absence, states like greatness or expanded states of mind, exalted, or when the mind is unexalted, not spacious, not expansive, or when it's, in the words of the sutta, surpassed or unsurpassed, i.e. when it's fully developed to the fullest extent possible, with all the different kinds of powers of the mind, or when it's not, when it still has potential for growth. And then when the mind is concentrated or composed, when the mind is fully composed, or when the mind is not fully composed. And lastly, when the mind is liberated, even temporary liberation from dukkha through development of composure of mind, or when it's not, when it's unliberated. So that's the first step, just knowing what's there and what's not there with clarity and acceptance. That's the first. That's pretty much it in the Satipatthana. That's as far as it goes, not including the refrain section where one looks at all of these Satipatthanas for the qualities of impermanence, essentially, and not self. But and that's the first. But the first step is that recognition of the presence or absence, and that correlates with that first part of the Anapanasati Sutta, where the instructions are breathing in, breathing out. One basically is just fully experiencing the mind, the heart, the citta patisangvedi, fully experiencing citta in all of its manifestations. Then taking the Anapanasati to the next step, this is where it kind of offers a bit more fleshing out and instruction, say from just the Satipatthana. It talks about gladdening the mind, abhipamodayang cittang, gladdening the mind. So with these obstructive states that can be present, there are some things we can do to help clear things up a bit, help the mind settle back to a more pure, natural, reflective state. And a lot of them, I think, because I think many of us do experience these cramped and difficult, constricted mind states that are so unpleasant and so narrow, and they become our entire world. It just can be kind of imploding sometimes when the mind goes through those states. That I like to focus my attention on relaxing and expanding as the way of gladdening my mind. Because the more expansive and allowing and receptive and attentive I can be, the more there's the space for that, those constricted mind states to just pass on their own accord, by not feeding them, by just allowing them that expansive heart to hold them. Not feeding is something that's really important for these constricted, painful mind states. Not pushing away, not resisting, but not encouraging, not feeding. And reminded of a story from the suttas, at least based in the suttas, with a lot of embellishments. That is always a great image for this process, how to handle these constricted states of mind. That there's an occasion up in the Brahma worlds where the great Brahma is away on some sort of business, or another. And, the great Brahma, of course, lives in a very splendiferous palace with a big throne. And of course, the palace is the main sala. I have my own visual images, so these are my embellishments. This isn't what's in the sutta. The sutta is actually pretty straightforward, but post-canonical references and then my own imaginings kind of embellished it to visualize a big sala, a big open air sala, maybe of marble and jade and wonderful plants and quite beautiful and lovely, and the throne sitting up at the front, very large and spacious, but now empty. And the retinue, the Brahma's retinue, they're going about their business, doing what they do up in the Brahma realm. And while the great Brahma is away, somehow this teeny little demon from some realm below is able to pop up to the Brahma realm and find his way to the great Brahma's sala and sees the empty throne. And I picture this little demon as kind of, small and compact and kind of, maybe a little muscly and tight. A big scowl on its face, maybe about 2 feet high, really small. And kind of like all full of bullying energy and anger. And he kind of runs up in these short little steps and hops up onto the throne and turns around and sits there, very proud of himself, but you can barely see him, he's so tiny. But to himself, he's full. And so he's just sitting there and he's kind of exuding his negativity and his anger and his hatred and his trying to intimidate the retinue that's kind of milling around. And somebody notices him. The first person notices him and says, "Oh my God, there's this little demon. How did he get there? And how could he be sitting up on Brahma's throne? What can he be thinking?" And the little demon picks up on this negative energy, this anger from the retinue member. And because he's an anger-eating demon, he feeds on that, and it feels wonderful. And all of a sudden, his power increases just a bit, and he gets a little bit bigger. And he grows in size, and more of the retinue start seeing this happening, and people start to get worried and agitated, and wonder, what's going on, and why isn't the Brahma here to get rid of this little guy, and all that's happening, and the little demon's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, feeding on all of this aversion, and pretty soon he's overflowing the throne and is this huge menacing figure. And as the story goes, the Brahma, the great Brahma, returns from his business, and you can see the light glowing from the distance as he gets closer, and the brilliance starting to grow in intensity. And he sees what's happening and sees the big ogre on his throne. And in the embellished version of this story, he starts to talk to the demon, and in very, very gentle but clear and with a clear presence, but massive tenderness and kindness, starts to talk to the demon. "Oh, what are you doing here? And where do you come from?" And the demon's trying to be threatening, but great Brahma, in his expansive state of metta, he just doesn't buy into the demon's presence, and just meets all the anger and fearfulness with great compassion and great presence. And as that happens, of course, the demon starts to shrink, get smaller and smaller and smaller, and all of a sudden he's back to his original 2-foot size, hops off the throne and dashes back down to his own lower realm. So it's just it's just kind of a nice little image to, in the moments of your meditation when you're feeling a little bit cramped and tight, and just to visualize this scenario. I do that, and it kind of takes away the tightness of my own little demon state. And is just a nice metaphor for the power of an expanded mind state, where you're not trying to get rid of anything, you're not trying to push away, you're not trying to muscle out that which is there, even if it's unskillful or unpleasant or difficult. You're just seeing it with clarity and with a vast sense of presence, such that the power of that state of mind is diminished, just not because it's being nullified or resisted or countered with some sort of powerful antidote, but because it's just been given space. So that's what we can do, I think, when we're suffering with these contracted states of mind, or any of the other reflections that bring about gladdening of the mind in an expansive way. All the Brahma Viharas, the Karuna compassion, where we can be present with the pain and the suffering that we're experiencing, that the world is experiencing, by broadening our perspective, by reflecting that the suffering that we're feeling in our difficulties is no different from anybody else's. It's not a personal thing. It's not limited to me and my small world, which is what it feels like sometimes. But just reflecting that this is a human trait. This is the suffering, not my suffering. And that we can have, just as we can have compassion for other people, we can have compassion for ourselves, to just recognize that, yeah, this is an unavoidable part of human life. And it's not a resignation, and it's certainly not like submitting to it, because one is seeing it with wisdom as well. One is seeing it for just what it is, with clarity, not with any kind of pity or absorption into the suffering of it all, but just the vast recognition that this is the first noble truth. Or the mudita, expansive state of mind, has kind of the opposite flavor, that when we see and recognize in our own life or the lives of others, things that are going well, things that are going skillfully, people's virtue, our generosity, others' generosity, that these are conditions that are existent in the world, and to look at them and to make much of them, to notice them and to put our attention on them, and to really reflect and bring them into our heart, and have that sense of gratitude and appreciation for the goodness that does arise in the world, and remembering that all of us here and in many other places are really striving to bring peace and clarity into our experience, into our minds and hearts, and goodness into the world. We all give occasion for incomparable goodness to arise in the world. And to really absorb into that and see the ease and expansiveness of the mind that comes with that reflection. gladdening the mind. Equanimity, that great, expansive, very broad, accepting, but non-reactivity to all the wonderful, alluring, pleasant things and all the difficult, painful things. One sees it with wisdom. All of those states of mind sees them with wisdom as arising due to causes and conditions. You see the process that all of this experience, for good or for ill, where it all comes from. So the 4 Brahma Viharas are ways to really expand our experience from the narrow, contracted, unpleasant states of mind. Another one that I think always gets or needs to be remembered is the great patience, Kanti Parami, as a way of just being able to hold these contracted states and actually this retreat, when I've had those mind states kind of appear, I think Kanti Parami has been my go-to for most of it. That big space in the mind that is able to abide with unpleasant situations, to be with them, and not just patience for, say, the object of our difficulty, the difficult person or the bad situation or the unfairness or all of the things that can cause us to fall into these states of mind. Not just patience for the object, but patience for the actual state of mind. Really turning that ability to be present with difficulty and the allowance of it to be directed towards the state of mind itself. Just to abide with it and not push it away, and to realize it just as a transient state. Might feel pretty tight and entrenched and permanent, but if we can get that distance with patience, with great allowance, willing to abide with it, then that just opens up the body. You can really feel, if you're in tune with the body, all the muscles in the face start to relax, the forehead creases uncrease, and the tightness around the eyes can start to relax. The jaw opens a little bit. The body itself, all the knots and tension that you can feel when you're in a cramped state of mind, those, all of a sudden the body can just find its balance, and with that more expansive state of mind, there you are. Where did it all go? What happened to that tension and that difficulty? And in that kind of expansion, the objects that were causing it just don't seem to be so significant anymore. They may still be there, but in that space they're just much less impactful. Not such a big deal. And you didn't have to push it away. Just creating the space, expansiveness around it. And when that happens, when we've softened the mind, gladdened the mind, made it easeful, abhipamodayang, that's based on that word, pamoja, easefulness, gladness. Then the mind has the opportunity to, it just naturally moves towards the third step of developing collectedness and composure, concentration, samadhi, because it's just the natural inclination at that point. You don't have to force the mind into a state of samadhi. It settles there. If your object is the breathing, then it just becomes more apparent. You're relaxed and at ease in the body. All of a sudden, there's the breathing. And you can feel it wherever it's most noticeable, at a particular point or throughout the whole body. But the ease and well-being of just being with that breathing permeates, suffuses the entire body and mind. And you didn't even have to force it. You didn't have to pin it down and concentrate on it. It just becomes present because all the obstructions have melted away. And then being just with that, the mind just wants to dwell there, wants to absorb into it until it becomes an unwavering kind of composure. That's all that needs to be there, is the breathing and the well-being that comes from it. And it's not a pinched or an exclusive attention. It's very broad and open and aware, bright, energetic, all inclusive attention with simple process of the body doing what it's doing, very rhythmically and quietly. And as the mind really settles into that, with the clarity of that very simple, soothing stillness, then the mind is freed, temporarily at least, freed from dukkha. It doesn't have the space to grab hold. All the hindrances are in abeyance. And the mind is just able to dwell in a very suffusive peace, very suffusive stillness. So concentrating or composing the mind and freeing the mind. So this is the citta nupassana, part of our contemplative practice, used reflected on, brought into our experience in addition to and complementary to and part of knowing the body, grounding ourselves in the body. The two, body and mind, are very much integrated and reflective of each other. We can know one through the other, and need to cultivate and nurture our mindfulness and our clear comprehension in an all-around way, all-inclusive of body and mind, to be able to experience that fullness of the contemplative practice, the body and mind, which is the foundation for the development of wisdom, which is what we've been talking about, particularly this past week as well, how to develop insight and the complete freedom that comes with the development of this practice even further. But just remembering citta nupassana, contemplation of the mind, from that tightness and experiencing of the mind just as it is, for better or for worse, and then opening, expanding, gladdening, making space for all the problems so that they have a way to relax and dissipate, and then soothing, stilling, and releasing the citta, releasing the heart. So we have a couple more weeks to reflect on these kinds of things and to bring it into our daily practice. And I'll offer that for this evening's reflection.